A low growl vibrated through the soles of Leo's sneakers, a premonition of the approaching spectacle. Each step intensified the sound, transforming it into a guttural roar that swallowed the birdsong and the whispering sycamores. His father's steadying hand guided him through a makeshift gate of orange netting and flimsy poles. Beyond, a gleaming ocean of chrome and leather shimmered under the afternoon sun. "Welcome to the Iron Horseman's annual charity ride, son." His dad's voice, a mere thread amidst the rising clamor, reached him. A familiar crinkle formed at the corners of his eyes, a silent chuckle. "Quite a racket, eh?" Racket was an understatement. It was a full-frontal sensory assault, a percussive symphony of internal combustion that pulsed in Leo's chest. Thousands of motorcycles, each a formidable beast of metal and raw power, sprawled across the vast field. Harleys, Indians, Triumphs, a vibrant kaleidoscope of marks and models, each personalized with intricate paintwork, audacious extended forks, and exhaust pipes that spat defiance. The very air was a potent elixir of gasoline and hot metal, a heady, intoxicating perfume. Leo's eyes, wide with sheer wonder, danced from one polished fender to the next. He observed men and women, many adorned with impressive beards and tattoos that writhed up their arms, laughing, gesticulating, their voices wrestling with the mechanical chorus. Vests bristled with patches, eagles, skulls, and cryptic symbols hinting at a world both formidable and fascinating. A vendor hawked sizzling hot dogs, their charred aroma mingling with the industrial tang. Another stall offered leather goods, the scent of cured hide adding yet another layer to the rich olfactory tapestry. "All right, Leo," his dad began, pulling him closer. "Time to play. What do you observe?" Leo snapped out of his trance, his father's words a well-worn cue. This was their ritual, a subtle yet persistent tutelage and observation. It began with simple challenges, identifying car makes on the highway, and escalated to more complex tasks, discerning a subtle limp, counting coffee cups, recognizing a specific knot. His father called it situational awareness, a phrase Leo had known since he could point. Lots of bikes," Leo offered, stating the obvious with an immediate twinge of regret. His dad never wanted obvious. His father chuckled. "Astute, Sherlock. Now, delve deeper." Leo took a deep breath, attempting to distill the overwhelming sensory input into distinct details. "Okay, that man in the red bandana has a scar above his left eyebrow, and his jacket cuff is frayed." He pointed discreetly. "And that woman over there, with the long braid, keeps checking her watch, like she's expecting someone important." His dad's slow nod, a flicker of approval in his eyes, spurred him on. "Excellent. And what else?" Leo's gaze swept across the throng. Sunlight splintered off him, thousand spokes, creating a shimmering optical illusion. The roar of engines, some idling, others revving with an impatient snarl, formed a constant backdrop. He spotted a small group gathered around a particularly imposing black motorcycle, its engine a low, resonant thrum. One man, burly and heavily tattooed, meticulously polished the already gleaming chrome. Another, leaner, with a wispy goatee, fiddled with something near the handlebars, his brow furrowed in concentration. "That group over there," Leo indicated, with a subtle chin point. "The one with the black bike. The big guy is cleaning it, but the other one, he's messing with something on the front. He keeps looking around, like he doesn't want anyone to see what he's doing." Leo paused, his brow furrowed in thought. "And his hands?" "They're moving really fast, like he's trying to hide it." His dad followed Leo's gaze. His expression remained neutral, but Leo knew that sharp, analytical mind was already sifting through the information. Very good, Leo. What do you notice about their bikes specifically? Leo squinted. The black bike was impressive, no doubt. But what set it apart? He focused on the minutiae. Well, the big one, the one being cleaned, has a really loud exhaust. You can hear it even over everything else. And the other one, the one the man is working on, it looks newer. And the exhaust, it's actually quieter than the others. That's odd, isn't it? Most of these guys want loud. Indeed, his father murmured, his eyes still fixed on the group. Anything else about those particular bikes? Anything that feels incongruous? Leo thought hard. The sheer volume of bikes made direct comparison difficult, but he remembered his dad's emphasis on pattern recognition. The tires, he finally said, a spark of insight igniting. The big guy's bike, the tires are really worn, like he's ridden a lot. But the other one, the one with the quiet exhaust, the tires are almost brand new. Yet, it looks like an older model bike otherwise. His dad nodded, a small, almost imperceptible dip of his head. Excellent. You're spotting the discrepancies. You're noticing the incongruities. That's how you identify trouble before it escalates. The thrill of the rally, its raw energy, was exhilarating. Leo felt a surge of adrenaline, a sense of belonging to this wild, untamed world. But even amidst the excitement, his father's words resonated. Spot trouble before it becomes trouble. It wasn't merely a game, it was a creed, a fundamental principle his father lived by, a constant whisper in Leo's ear. He understood, implicitly, that observation wasn't just about seeing. It was about comprehension, about connecting the disparate dots, about recognizing the subtle shift in the pattern that signaled something was amiss. A phalanx of bikers roared past, their engines carving a momentary vacuum of sound as they sped toward the starting line. The crowd surged forward, eager to witness the commencement of the ride. Leo felt the powerful pull of the spectacle. Yet even as his heart hammered with excitement, his eyes continued their scan. His mind continued its relentless processing. The man with the quiet exhaust now stood upright, wiping his hands on a rag, and for a split second, his gaze flickered directly at Leo, a hint of something unreadable in his eyes before he turned away. Leo felt a shiver, a prickle of unease that had nothing to do with the roaring engines or the thrilling atmosphere. It was a faint, almost imperceptible, discordant note in the symphony of the rally, a tiny deviation from the expected pattern. And his father had taught him to listen for those. "Ready for the grand start, son?" his dad asked, his hand still on Leo's shoulder, a grounding presence amidst the clamor. Leo swallowed, the feeling of unease still clinging to him. He nodded, but his gaze drifted back to the man with the quiet exhaust, who was now melting into the crowd, his back to them. The roar was building, a crescendo of power and anticipation. Soon, the engines would all ignite, simultaneously, a thunderous declaration of intent. And Leo couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong. Shadows in the lot, the heady perfume of oil and exhaust, sweetened by a distant waft of funnel cake, drew Leo deeper into the rally's pulsing perimeter. His father, now engrossed in animated banter with a man whose beard cascaded to his navel, had unwittingly granted Leo a precious window of unchaperoned exploration. He drifted toward the dense ranks of motorcycles, a shimmering, chrome-laden tapestry catching the late afternoon sun. Each machine, a metallic sculpture, whispered tales of velocity and liberation. His gaze caressed the sleek curve of a gas tank, admiring the elaborate paintwork of a screaming eagle, talons poised. The sheer diversity was striking. Low-slung racing bikes hugging the tarmac, towering choppers with impossibly elongated forks, and robust touring models engineered for endless horizons. He gravitated to a section where the bikes were packed tightly, forming narrow, gleaming canyons. Here, the light softened, dappled by the meager shade of a gnarled oak. A muted thrum of conversation and faint music penetrated this space, yet an almost reverent hush seemed to fall over these metal beasts. He conjured the visceral roar of engines, the exhilarating rush of wind as he rocketed down an open highway. A thrill yet unexperienced, but yearned for, with an intensity that surprised him. Then, a subtle stir at the far end of the row snagged his attention. Two hunched figures were silhouetted between a glossy black Harley and a venerable Indian chief. Shrouded by the bike's own shadows, their forms appeared indistinct, almost spectral. Leo's initial thought was simple admiration, perhaps a discussion of modifications or engine specs, common enough at such an event. But their posture was all wrong. No upright stance, no hands on hips, no casual lean against a fender. They were crouched, almost crawling, heads dipped low as if examining something hidden beneath the frames. A faint, persistent prickle of disquiet began to needle Leo, a sensation mirroring the unease he'd felt earlier watching the quiet man with the new bike. His father's words echoed, "Always notice what doesn't fit, Leo. The little things." Here, the incongruity lay in their furtiveness, their movements too swift, too deliberate for mere appreciation. One, a lanky individual with a cap pulled low, seemed to be manipulating something, his body angled to shield his actions from view. The other, sturdier, acted as a sentinel, his head swiveling slowly, meticulously scanning the periphery. Leo instinctively recoiled a step, receding further into the deeper shadow of a nearby RV. His heart gave a soft thump against his ribs. Not yet fear, but a sharpened awareness. He strained his eyes, desperate for details, but the shadows clung too deeply. He caught a fleeting glint of metal in the lanky man's hand before it vanished. A soft, metallic click, barely audible above the rally's distant drone, reached his ears. It was a sound out of place, too sharp, too precise for a biker's casual tinkering. The stockier figure gave a nearly imperceptible nod. In unison they straightened, their movements fluid and practiced. They didn't linger, didn't glance back. Instead, they dissolved into the labyrinth of parked vehicles, vanishing as silently as they had materialized. One moment they were a tangible disturbance in the quiet lot. The next, only the motionless bikes remained, gleaming innocently under the diminishing light. Leo stayed hidden, his breath held captive. The metallic click replayed in his mind, amplified by the sudden void they left behind. A profound sense of wrongness settled over him, a cold certainty that what he'd witnessed was far from innocent. The air in the parking lot, moments ago vibrant with the promise of adventure, now felt taut, charged with an unseen tension. He longed to dismiss it, to rationalize it, as two enthusiasts checking their engines. But the image of their hunched, secretive forms, the rapid, practiced movements, and their eerie, silent departure wouldn't allow it. A chill snaked down his spine, leaving a knot of anxiety twisting in his stomach. He had to tell someone. He had to find his dad, a cold shiver. That metallic click, a tiny, unassuming sound, had burrowed deep into Leo's awareness. He tried to drown it in the rally's cacophony. The distant thrum of engines, the throbbing bass, the boisterous laughter. But the precise, deliberate click refused to be absorbed. It was an anomaly, carrying an unsettling weight, a whisper of something clandestine that grated against the celebratory chaos. He drifted for minutes, eyes scanning the crowd, half expecting the two furtive figures to reappear, perhaps to offer some mundane explanation. But they were gone, swallowed by the sea of leather and chrome. The sun, once a comforting warmth, now felt oddly cool on his skin. A prickle of unease, an icy tendril, began to uncoil from his stomach, reaching for his chest. "Things that don't belong, Leo." His dad's calm, steady voice surfaced in his memory. He pictured a rainy afternoon in the garage, his father demonstrating the intricate workings of a carburetor, then pointing to a loose wire. "That, son, doesn't belong. It'll mess up the whole system if you ignore it." The lesson transcended mechanics. It was about keen observation, identifying discrepancies, trusting his gut when things felt askew. And this felt profoundly askew. The men's almost slithering movements low to the ground, the quick, practiced gesture, the absolute silence of their departure. This wasn't the off of a flat tire. It was a deeper, more insidious wrongness. The air around him suddenly crackled with an unseen energy. The rally, moments ago, a vibrant tapestry, began to fray at the edges, revealing a sinister undercurrent, the low rumble of an idling engine. Previously just ambient noise, now vibrated with a latent menace. He gazed at the gleaming rows of bikes, each a testament to power and freedom. But now, his mind fixated on the shadowed underside, where those men had crouched. The space between the tires, the darkness clinging to the frames. A shiver, sharp and involuntary, snaked down his spine. It wasn't the cooling breeze. The afternoon was still mild. It was a cold shiver, born of a burgeoning dread he couldn't quite articulate. His dad had always taught him vigilance, to notice the small things, the anomalies. "The devil's in the details, Leo," he'd often say, his eyes crinkling. And sometimes, the devil really is the detail. The thought sent another wave of unease through him. What detail had he truly witnessed? What precisely had that click heralded? He replayed the scene, magnifying the fleeting moment. A glint of metal, the swift, almost imperceptible flick of a hand. He remembered the men's eyes, a focused, almost predatory concentration that had no place at a motorcycle rally. He needed his dad. The urge was sudden and overwhelming, a desperate pull towards the one person who would understand, who would take his observations seriously. His dad, with his military background, possessed an uncanny knack for seeing beyond the surface, for discerning patterns in chaos. He'd taught Leo about booby traps in old war movies, about tripwires and timed charges, about the meticulous planning of those who sought to cause harm. He'd shown him diagrams of explosives, explained their components, the dangers. Leo had always found it morbidly fascinating, satisfied by his dad's calm, detached explanations. Now, that fascination twisted into a knot of genuine fear. The rally's energy, once exhilarating, now felt like a tightly wound spring, poised to snap. The laughter seemed brittle, the music a frantic beat against an unseen danger. He looked around at the jovial, oblivious faces of the bikers. A sense of urgency, sharp and clear, coalesced within him. He had seen something bad. And the metallic click, no longer innocuous, had become a chilling pronouncement. He had to tell someone. He had to tell his dad. Now, he began to push through the crowd, a frantic energy propelling him forward, his eyes scanning for a familiar figure, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The cold shiver was no longer just a shiver. It was a deep, bone-chilling certainty. The rally's edge. The crowd's roar surged, a living current of excitement that slammed into Leo. Bodies pressed in, a vibrant mosaic of leather and denim, each person a vital fiber in the collective thrill. The air thickened with exhaust, sweat, and a metallic tang. A distant cough, then a rumble, then another. Engines sputtering to life, hundreds of them. A mechanical symphony awakening. The grand start was moments away, but Leo wasn't part of that tide. He was an isolated reef in a churning sea, his earlier unease now a freezing dread coiling in his gut. The memory flickered. Furtive hands, a metallic gleam in the shadows. He'd initially dismissed it as an oddity, a peculiar detail in the bustling scene. Then a faint glimmer. A movement he'd barely registered at the time struck him with physical force. A thin, almost invisible filament snaking along the undercarriage of a parked bike, precisely where those two men had lingered. It wasn't just a wire. It was the wire. His father's calm, precise voice echoed, "Always look for the anomalies, Leo. The things that don't belong, especially the wires. If it's not supposed to be there, if it's too fine, too well hidden, or just off, then it's a problem." Dad had meticulously explained diagrams of triggers, the subtle mechanics of remote detonators, pressure plates, vibration sensors. He'd even shown how some explosives disguised themselves as integral machinery, blending in until it was irrevocably too late. Panic, scorching and sharp, ignited within him. The pieces now clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The men, seemingly idle, but their eyes constantly scanning, assessing. Their quick, practiced movements. The almost imperceptible click he'd heard. It wasn't merely a wire. It was a trigger. Connected to what? The answer felt chillingly obvious. Something devastating. "No! Wait!" he shrieked, his voice reedy against the burgeoning engine cacophony. He shoved against the unyielding wall of bodies, a desperate thrash against the indifferent throng. "Don't start them! Please, don't start the engines!" No one heard. Or if they did, they dismissed him as a child, overwhelmed by noise. A minor discord in the grand spectacle. The ground vibrated beneath his feet, a deep thrumming resonating in his bones. More engines caught, their individual roars merging into a sustained thunder. Exhaust fumes billowed, stinging his eyes. He tasted the metallic tang of his own fear. He had to reach his dad. He had to make them understand. The thought propelled him, a desperate surge of adrenaline. He ducked under an arm, squeezed past a burly man with a tattooed neck, his small frame almost vanishing in the crush. His gaze darted back to the row of bikes where he'd seen the men. The thin, nearly invisible filament remained, now shimmering slightly, with the engine's increasing hum. It was precisely as his father had described, meticulously placed, designed to go unnoticed until catastrophe struck. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat anticipating disaster. His breath hitched. He burst through a narrow gap, stumbling, his eyes frantically scanning for his father's familiar, reassuring figure. He saw him then, a few yards away, just turning his head, a smile beginning to form as he prepared to join the roaring symphony. "Dad, stop! Stop them!" Leo screamed, his voice raw, hoarse from the effort. He didn't care if he sounded deranged. He didn't care about the stares he was finally attracting. He only saw the wire, felt the vibrations, and knew with absolute certainty that devastation was moments away. The rally, a symbol of freedom and camaraderie, teetered on the brink of utter ruin. A boy's desperate cry. The air throbbed, a prelude to the engine's symphony. But for Leo, it was a countdown to calamity. His heart, a frantic metronome, drowned out the rising tide of excitement. A cold, sharp panic threatened to seize him. Yet a deeper, primal instinct surged through his veins. He had to intervene. "Stop! Don't start the engines!" His voice, a thin reed, was swallowed by the encroaching crescendo. He pressed forward, against a bulwark of leather and denim, a tiny salmon battling an upstream human current. The atmosphere, thick with exhaust and the heady perfume of gasoline, felt heavy, suffocating. Each step was a struggle, his small frame buffeted by unyielding bodies. "Excuse me! Please let me through!" he pleaded, his voice cracking with urgency. Elbows and shoulders, hard as granite, barely registered his presence. He ducked, weaved, and squeezed through narrow apertures, propelled by an almost manic desperation. Faces turned, briefly annoyed, then dismissed the small figure as just another overeager child. A burly biker, his back a tapestry of faded ink, grunted as Leo collided with him. "Watch it, kid! Don't start the engines! Please don't start!" he shrieked again, his throat raw. The words felt insubstantial, lost in the clamor. He needed to be louder, more forceful. His father, a distant blur of familiar leather and chrome, was perched on his gleaming machine, hand reaching for the ignition. A wave of dread, chilling him to the bone, washed over Leo. He pictured the detonator, a tiny, innocuous device nestled beneath the seat. He envisioned the spark, the unfathomable explosion that would rend this joyous gathering, transforming celebration into unthinkable carnage. The thought ignited a surge of adrenaline, overriding his exhaustion. He scrambled onward, small hands pushing against unyielding fabric, feet stumbling over discarded cans and loose gravel. Grizzly, a formidable barrier of a man near the front, shifted impatiently. A faint, high-pitched wail, an irritating background noise, pricked his ears. He glanced back, annoyance etching his weathered face. A small boy, eyes wide with terror, was fighting his way through the throng, an unusual sight so close to the starting line. The child's face was contorted, streaked with grime and tears, screaming something unintelligible. "Don't start! Please, stop!" Leo's voice finally pierced the immediate din, a desperate, almost animalistic cry. It was loud enough to snag the attention of a few nearby bikers, men already adjusting helmets and revving engines in anticipation. They turned, a mix of irritation and confusion clouding their faces. "What in the blazes is going on?" one grumbled, his helmet slightly raised. Another, younger, with a neatly trimmed beard, leaned over, brow furrowed. "Kid, you all right? What's all the fuss?" Leo ignored them, his gaze riveted on his father, now settled into position, hand hovering over the starter. "Dad, don't. Stop," he bellowed, his voice ragged but piercing. He pointed frantically towards the motorcycles, his arm a desperate arrow. "The bikes. Don't start the bikes." More heads turned, their collective anticipation now tinged with a flicker of annoyance. Who was this child, spoiling the moment? The air hummed with barely contained power, engines sputtering and roaring, poised to unleash their fury. The starting flag was about to drop. Leo knew he had mere seconds. He pushed past the last few bodies, bursting free of the dense throng just feet from the gleaming row of machines. He stumbled, catching himself before he fell, eyes darting frantically between his father's bike and the others. The metallic click, the memory of it echoed in his mind, sharp and clear. "Explosives!" he shrieked, the word tearing from his lungs, raw and desperate. "There are explosives on the bikes! Don't start the engines! Please, stop!" The word, stark and terrifying, sliced through the mechanical symphony like a blade. The sudden silence was almost as deafening as the previous roar, a ripple of stunned disbelief spreading through the first few rows of spectators and riders. Grizzly, on the verge of pulling down his visor, froze, hand suspended in midair. He looked at the boy, truly looked at him this time, and saw not childish exuberance, but genuine, unadulterated terror. Grizzly's scowl. A collective gasp, cold and sharp, lacerated the air, leaving a vacuum where the engine's roar had been. All eyes, scores of them, were riveted on Leo, a small, quivering figure at the square's fore. His chest heaved, dust-smudged cheeks streaked with tears. The quiet was absolute, a heavy blanket amplifying the sudden absence of the rally's usual din. From the bike's clustered heart, a hulking silhouette detached itself. Grizzly. He moved with a lumbering grace, each stride devouring the ground between him and Leo. The sinking sun caught the silver of rings on his thick fingers, the faint sheen on his bald head. His leather vest, a worn mosaic of club patches, stretched taut across a barrel chest. He didn't merely walk, he advanced, a force of nature clad in distressed denim and leather. A cold dread seeped into Leo's bones, a fresh terror eclipsing the one that had propelled him across the square. Grizzly was a granite slab, an unyielding monolith, and Leo, at this moment, a mere pebble in his path. The biker's eyes, usually crinkled with sun-baked mirth, narrowed to dark, unreadable slits. "What in the blazes do you think you're doing, kid?" Grizzly's voice was a low growl, rumbling through the sudden hush. It wasn't a query, but a pronouncement, a gauntlet thrown before the entire rally. His gaze swept Leo dismissively, then snagged on the father, still grappling with his son, a confused worry etched on his face. Leo flinched, shrinking under the intensity. He opened his mouth, but words snagged in his throat, a dry knot of fear and exhaustion. The glint of metal beneath the bike, the precise coil of wire, flashed in his mind, momentarily eclipsing the towering figure. I saw," Leo stammered, his voice reedy, swallowed by the oppressive silence. He glanced wildly, seeking validation, finding only a sea of stern, questioning faces. His father stepped forward, hand extended, but Grizzly imperiously waved him back. "Saw what?" Grizzly pressed, his voice retaining its gravelly edge, though a flicker of impatience crossed his features. "You just stopped the whole damn rally, son. You got about 5 seconds to give me a good reason why." The implied menace in Grizzly's tone was unmistakable. Leo's breath hitched. He wanted to flee, to burrow into his father's side and vanish. But his father's words, a mantra in his mind. "If you see something, say something, son. No matter how scared you are," spurred him on. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet Grizzly's unwavering gaze. The bikes," Leo managed, his voice stronger now, though still quivering. "Underneath, in the parking lot, I saw them. The men. They were putting things on them." He gestured vaguely toward the cordoned-off motorcycle area. Grizzly's brow furrowed, a deep canyon appearing between his thick eyebrows. He glanced over his shoulder at his fellow bikers, some now exchanging uneasy looks. The sheer conviction in Leo's voice, despite its tremor, began to cut through the initial annoyance. "What kind of things?" Grizzly asked, his voice losing some of its initial harshness, replaced by cautious curiosity. He leaned forward slightly, his posture still intimidating, but his eyes, fixed on Leo's face, held a new intensity. Leo's eyes welled again, not just from fear now, but from the raw terror of reliving the moment. He saw the dark, slender package, the precise, almost surgical way the men had worked, the cold glint of metallic clips. He saw the detonator wire, so thin, so unassuming, yet so deadly. "Wires," Leo whispered, his voice cracking. And metal. They were hiding them. Under the engines, I heard a click, like a switch. He shivered uncontrollably, his small body racked by the memory. "Please, Grizzly," he pleaded, his voice rising in desperation. "They're explosives. They'll blow up if you start them." The word explosives hung in the air, a chilling echo. Grizzly's face, usually a mask of rugged stoicism, underwent a subtle but profound shift. The scowl softened, replaced by dawning realization. He saw the genuine, unadulterated fear etched on the boy's face, the trembling hands, the wide, terrified eyes that seemed to hold the weight of a terrible secret. This wasn't a mischievous kid seeking attention. This was a child who had witnessed something truly horrifying. Grizzly's gaze swept the crowd again, lingering on Leo's father, then back to the boy. He saw no trickery, no childish prank, only stark, unvarnished dread. The sheer terror radiating from Leo was palpable, a cold wave washing over even the most skeptical. Grizzly's jaw tightened, his massive hands clenching into fists at his sides. He took another step towards Leo, not in anger, but in a sudden, urgent shift of focus. The rally, the roar, the annoyance, all evaporated in the face of the boy's palpable dread. Under the machines, Grizzly's usual engine-like growl, reserved for the open road or a stubborn carburetor, softened to a rumbling inquiry. He knelt, his vast frame eclipsing the boy, his voice a surprising hush. "You saw men. Describe them." Leo, still trembling, clutched the metallic wire. "Not like you. Smaller. Dark clothes, though the sun was bright, and these boxes, like lunch boxes, but for wires." His eyes flitted from the bikes to Grizzly's stern face. "Underneath. They put them underneath." Grizzly rose, his gaze sweeping the chrome and leather expanse. The initial anger provoked by Leo's outburst had given way to a cold, calculating glint. Gruff he might be, but no fool. The boy's terror was palpable, his details unnervingly precise. He eyed the wire in Leo's hand, then surveyed his club members, their faces a blend of annoyance and bewildered curiosity. "All right, listen up," his voice boomed, slicing through the murmurs. "This kid saw something fishy. Says some fellas were messing with our rides." A chorus of disbelieving snorts and sarcastic chuckles rippled through the group. Yeah, laugh it up. But the kid's scared senseless, and he's holding a wire that looks like it belongs in a bomb disposal kit, not a kid's pocket. He held up the detonator wire Leo had relinquished. The chatter died, replaced by a ripple of unease. "Humor me, and humor the kid. Just take a quick peek under your bikes. Couldn't hurt, could it?" Though skeptical, the bikers respected Grizzly's command. With grumbles and theatric sighs, they dispersed. Burly men, usually astride their powerful machines, now awkwardly bent and crouched, their leather jackets creaking as they contorted to peer beneath their prized possessions. Flashlights flickered on, carving narrow beams through the shadows beneath engine blocks and exhaust pipes. "Nothing here, Grizz," a voice called, followed by a dismissive shrug. "Just dust bunnies and oil drips under mine," another chimed, a scoff clear in his tone. Leo watched, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. Doubt began to insinuate itself, chilling him despite the warm air. Had he imagined it? Was the metallic click a trick of his mind, a figment of his fear? He squeezed his eyes shut, replaying the memory. The furtive movements, The dark shapes, the glint of metal, the distinct, chilling click. No, it had been real. He knew it. He looked at Grizzly, now kneeling beside his own behemoth of chrome and steel. Grizzly's head vanished into the shadows beneath the fuel tank, his large hands methodically tracing the frame. Moments of silence stretched, punctuated only by the low murmurs of the other bikers. Then, a sudden sharp intake of breath. Grizzly's head re-emerged, his face pale beneath his grizzled beard. His eyes, usually fierce, were wide with dawning horror. In his hand, held with surprising delicacy, was a small, rectangular device. Black, with a series of tiny wires snaking from one end, and a small blinking red light that pulsed with an ominous rhythm. It was precisely as Leo had described. A lunchbox for wires, sinister and out of place. The air seemed to solidify. The easy camaraderie of moments before shattered. "Holy hell," Grizzly whispered, his voice barely audible above the sudden stunned silence that had fallen over the rally. He looked at Leo, his gaze conveying a profound, unspoken apology and a chilling gratitude. He wasn't kidding. A ripple of panicked shouts erupted from the crowd as others, emboldened by Grizzly's discovery, began to unearth similar devices. "I got one too! Over here, under the seat!" The festive atmosphere dissolved into a chaotic scramble, the roar of engines replaced by the urgent cries of discovery. The metallic glint of the devices reflected the harsh sun, each tiny red light a silent, deadly heartbeat. The deadly harvest. "He ain't lying!" The shout ripped through the sudden quiet that had fallen over the rally, a jarring counterpoint to the distant hum of the highway. It came from a burly man with a handlebar mustache, his face pale beneath his weathered skin. He stood hunched over his chromed-out Road King, pointing a trembling finger at the underside of its engine. From his vantage point, Leo saw the glint of metal, a familiar rectangular shape mirroring the one Grizzly had just pulled from beneath his own beast. Another cry, this one sharp with a mix of fear and disbelief, erupted from the other side of the clearing. "Holy hell! I got one too!" A ripple of panicked motion spread through the crowd. Men who moments before had been idly chatting or adjusting their gear now scrambled, their eyes wide with a dawning horror. They dropped to their knees, fumbled with their phones' flashlights, and peered under their bikes with frantic urgency. The air crackled with a new kind of energy. Not the boisterous camaraderie of the rally, but a chilling current of impending doom. Leo, still clinging to his father's hand, watched the scene unfold with a morbid fascination. The initial terror that had driven him to Grizzly had receded, replaced by a cold, clinical understanding. He'd seen enough diagrams, enough historical footage to recognize the pattern. This wasn't some random act of vandalism. This was orchestrated, precise, and terrifyingly widespread. He felt a strange sort of vindication, a grim satisfaction that his observations, honed by his dad's patient teachings, had been accurate. But it was a fragile feeling, overshadowed by the sheer scale of the threat. Grizzly, his face a mask of grim determination, bellowed, "Everyone, check your damn bikes, and don't touch nothing unless I say so." His voice, usually a rumble, now carried an edge of steel. He moved with surprising agility, his gaze sweeping over the growing number of men who, with a mixture of dread and relief, were unearthing similar devices from beneath their machines. Each discovery was met with a chorus of curses, gasps, and the guttural sounds of barely contained fear. "It's on the fuel line," one man yelled, his voice cracking. "Mine's right by the exhaust manifold," another added, his face slick with sweat. Leo's father, ever the pragmatist, was already moving towards Grizzly. "We need to establish a safe perimeter, Grizzly, and we need to get everyone away from their bikes, now." His tone was calm, but the urgency in his eyes was unmistakable. Grizzly nodded, his jaw tight. "You heard the man. Get back, all of you. 10 feet minimum. Don't touch anything. And someone call the damn cops." The collective realization hit them like a physical blow. The festive atmosphere, the thrum of anticipation for the ride, all evaporated in an instant, replaced by a suffocating dread. The metallic glint of the devices, the tiny, insistent blink of LED lights, were no longer abstract threats. They were tangible, deadly realities, tucked away inches from their legs, their fuel tanks, their very lives. A woman, her face ashen, stumbled back from her husband's bike. A hand clapped over her mouth. Her eyes darted from one hidden device to another, a silent scream building behind her lips. Her husband, a mountain of a man with tattoos crawling up his arms, put a protective arm around her, his own bravado replaced by a stark, primal fear. The gasp that swept through the crowd was not a single sound, but a ragged chorus of exhaled breaths, a collective intake of horror. They had been standing on the precipice of oblivion, mere moments away from a catastrophic chain reaction that would have torn through their ranks, leaving a scene of unimaginable devastation. The roar of engines starting, a sound usually synonymous with freedom and power, now conjured images of fire, shrapnel, and screams. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, another emotion began to ripple through the assembly: relief. It was a dizzying, head-spinning sensation, a sudden release from a danger they hadn't even known they faced until moments ago. The sheer improbability of it all. A young boy, a quick eye, a gut feeling, had saved them. The air, thick with the smell of gasoline and fear, now seemed to carry a faint scent of reprieve. Grizzly looked at Leo, his intimidating demeanor softened by a profound gratitude. He didn't speak, but the look in his eyes, a mixture of awe and something akin to reverence, spoke volumes. Leo, for his part, felt a strange lightness in his chest. The adrenaline was still pumping, but it was now tinged with the quiet satisfaction of having been heard, of having made a difference. He hadn't just seen something, he had understood it, and in doing so, had pulled a deadly harvest from the very jaws of destruction. Hero and investigation. The wail of sirens, once a distant echo, now rent the air, piercing through the stunned silence that had fallen over the rally ground. Red and blue strobes painted the scene in an urgent, fragmented light. Uniformed officers, bomb disposal experts in their cumbersome suits, and paramedics swarmed the area, a disciplined chaos replacing the earlier panicked scramble. Each discovered device, carefully diffused and cataloged, was a chilling testament to the scale of the averted disaster. Leo, still trembling but adrenaline-wired, watched from the periphery, his dad's arm a comforting weight on his shoulder. A stern-faced police sergeant, his uniform crisp despite the unfolding chaos, approached them. He knelt, bringing his gaze level with Leo's. "You're the young man who raised the alarm?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Leo nodded, finding his voice a little hoarse. "Yes, sir. I saw something wrong." The sergeant's eyes, etched with lines of experience, crinkled at the corners. "Wrong indeed. You saved a lot of lives today, son. A real hero." He clapped Leo lightly on the shoulder, a gesture that brought a strange flush to Leo's cheeks. The word hero felt foreign, too grand for simply pointing out a suspicious wire. He'd just done what his dad had always taught him: observe, analyze, and act. Grizzly, his usual scowl softened into something akin to awe, lumbered over. "You ain't wrong, kid. You got guts, and eyes like a hawk." He offered Leo a surprisingly soft pat on the head, then turned to the sergeant. "These bastards meant business. Every single one of those things was rigged to blow. We owe this kid everything." Leo's dad stepped forward, a quiet pride in his demeanor. "He's a good boy, observant." "More than observant, Mr. the sergeant prompted. "Miller. John Miller." "Mr. Miller, your son's quick thinking and bravery prevented a massacre. We'll be needing statements from both of you, of course, and we'll ensure his contribution is properly recognized." As the immediate danger receded, the initial shock among the bikers gave way to a wave of gratitude. Rough hands clapped Leo's back, voices boomed with thanks, and a few even offered him their patches, a gesture of profound respect in their world. He felt overwhelmed, a small figure amidst giants, yet he stood taller than he had ever before. Later, huddled in a makeshift command center set up in the rally's main tent, Leo recounted his story again, this time to a team of detectives. He described the hooded figures, the furtive movements, the precise way they'd attached the devices. His detailed observations, honed by his father's lessons, were invaluable. He even drew a crude sketch of the device he'd first spotted, a memory that now felt hyper-real, burned into his mind. "So, you saw at least 3 individuals?" Detective Davies, a woman with a sharp gaze and an even sharper pen, asked, her words echoing through the cavernous tent. "Yes. They were quick. Almost like they knew exactly what they were doing," Leo replied, picturing the scene vividly. His dad added, "Their methods were professional. Military-grade explosives, precisely placed. This wasn't some amateur job." "Indeed," Davies confirmed, tapping her pen against her notepad. "We're looking at a highly organized, well-funded operation. The targets were specific, the timing precise. The intention was clear. Maximum casualties, maximum terror." She paused, looking at Leo. "You mentioned seeing them drive off in a dark van?" "Yeah, a black panel van. No windows in the back. I didn't get a plate." Leo felt a pang of frustration. He wished he'd gotten more details, but at the time, his focus had been on the device, not the getaway vehicle. "That's all right, son. Every detail helps," Davies assured him. "We've got units scouring the area for anything resembling that description. Forensics are all over the bikes, looking for fingerprints, anything they might have left behind. This is going to be a full-scale investigation. We're not going to rest until we find out who did this." Grizzly, who had stayed close, grunted. "You better not. Because if you don't, we will." His voice was low, laced with a cold fury that sent a shiver down Leo's spine. The implication was clear. The bikers would not forget, nor would they forgive. The rally, once a celebration of freedom and camaraderie, had almost become a scene of unimaginable horror. Now, it was a crucible, forging a grim resolve in its survivors. Leo, the unlikely catalyst, felt the weight of it all settle on his young shoulders, the quiet understanding that his role in this wasn't over. He had saved lives, but the hunt for those who had threatened them had just begun. A quiet understanding. The rally's clamor had receded, replaced by the mournful wail of distant sirens and the low hum of serious conversation. Leo perched on a makeshift bench beside his father, the day's adrenaline steadily leaching from his veins, leaving behind a profound weariness. His hand, still faintly trembling, clutched a cold, forgotten hot dog. Its flavor was irrelevant. The taste of triumph, of catastrophe narrowly averted, far outstripped any culinary delight. He watched the stuttering blue and red lights splash fleeting hues across the grim faces of police officers and stoic bikers. His dad, uncharacteristically quiet, draped a comforting arm over his shoulders. "You did good, son," he rumbled, his voice lacking its usual boisterousness, but brimming with a profound pride that warmed Leo to his core. His father wasn't one for elaborate praise, yet his unwavering gaze and the gentle pressure of his arm spoke volumes. Leo leaned into the embrace, closing his eyes for a brief moment. He replayed the frantic dash, the desperate pleas. The instant Grizzly's hardened eyes finally registered the raw terror in his own. He recalled the surge of raw courage, a sensation he'd never known he possessed. A strange cocktail of fear and exhilaration, a primal urge to protect, forged from every lesson his father had ever instilled. The tangled wires, the blinking LEDs, the almost invisible detonators, all were seared into his memory. A shiver traced his spine, not of fear, but of profound comprehension. He had perceived, acted, and redirected fate. A shadow fell over them. Leo opened his eyes to find Grizzly looming, a formidable presence even with his shoulders slightly slumped. The biker boss seemed transformed. His usual swagger had given way to a grave solemnity. His eyes, typically piercing, now held a softened, almost vulnerable glint. He knelt, an utterly uncharacteristic gesture that brought his craggy face closer to Leo's. The faint tang of leather and motor oil enveloped him. "Leo," Grizzly began, his voice a gravelly murmur, shorn of its customary boom. He cleared his throat, as if grappling with elusive words. "There ain't no proper way to thank you, kid." He reached out, and for a terrifying blink, Leo anticipated a hair ruffle. Instead, Grizzly's massive hand settled gently on Leo's shoulder, its touch surprisingly delicate. "You saved us. All of us. My club, our families. You saved damn near everyone here today." Leo, usually quick with a retort, found his tongue knotted. He simply nodded, his gaze fixed on the intricate tattoos snaking up Grizzly's brawny arm. We almost didn't listen," Grizzly continued, a flicker of regret etching his features. "Thought you were just a kid with a wild imagination. But you held your ground. You pushed, even when we were being hard-headed fools." He gave a humorless chuckle. "Your old man taught you well, taught you to see what others miss, to trust your gut." Grizzly glanced at Leo's father, a silent acknowledgement passing between the two men. Then he turned back to Leo, his gaze unwavering. "Listen to me, Leo. What you did today, that's courage. Real courage. And it ain't something we forget. Ever." He paused, searching for words once more. "You got a friend in me, kid. For life. Anything you need, anything at all, you come to me. You hear?" Leo finally found his voice, a reedy whisper. I just knew it was wrong." Grizzly nodded slowly. "And that's all that matters. Knowing when something's wrong and having the guts to do something about it." He rose, his joints creaking faintly. "We'll find the rats who did this, and when we do, they'll know they messed with the wrong crowd. But none of that would matter if you hadn't spoken up." He lingered a moment longer, then, with another nod, pivoted and walked away, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel. A quiet understanding settled between father and son. Leo's dad squeezed his shoulder again. "He means it, son. That's a powerful friend to have." Leo looked at his hands, then at Grizzly's receding figure. The words echoed in his mind. "You got a friend in me, kid. For life." It wasn't merely gratitude. It was profound respect. He had confronted his fears, faced dismissal, yet persevered. He had made a tangible difference. The exhaustion lingered, but now it was accompanied by a deep, quiet satisfaction, a nascent sense of purpose. He hadn't simply prevented an explosion. He had unearthed a strength within himself he never knew existed. The world, once a realm of simple rules and predictable outcomes, had abruptly expanded, revealing its hidden dangers and, more surprisingly, his own capacity for heroism. The weight of the experience was considerable, but it was a burden he felt ready to carry. He was no longer just Leo, the observant kid. He was Leo, the one who saw, the one who acted, the one who saved them all.